Yeah, so first of all, I'm really happy to come and talk at this event. It's really interesting, and it's kind of it's a bit odd for me talking these things because I can straddle quite a lot of different disciplines. Like I said, art practice PhD student, but my practice sits maybe uncomfortably more towards like philosophy than it does for art, at least uncomfortably for my supervisors sometimes. And my work, to make it even harder, is about horror films. So I have this kind of weird thing, which in some ways is probably like a nervous tactic. If you cross disciplines, no one can know enough about what you're doing, and you can be a bit safe. So I'm going to talk about this kind of figure, or this motif that I see in kind of horror media. And I'm going to deliberately not give you examples of the thing in films. So I really hope you haven't read my abstract, because I think in my abstract I did. But the idea is that if you feel like you know what it is, then you do. I'm going to use an example for something that's outside of horror film, but because of the kind of spooky ways of like memetics and stuff, it maybe gets pulled into a lot of fiction anyway. But it's just like a kind of visual thing, something to look at. Because I'm trying to be dynamic, so I'm aware that like kind of after lunch slot is really, really tough. So I'm going to try and be dynamic, but I'm also the lights here and stuff, so I might not be. So this thing will be throbbing to kind of keep you awake. If someone can give me the 5-minute warning, that would be fantastic. I'm pretty sure my talk is less, and it's more like 15 minutes. But part of kind of my weirdness is I'm on medication that gives me a really distorted idea of time. So I'm pretty sure this is on time, but like sometimes my perception of things just kind of compress and expand quite a lot. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of talk through this, but I'm going to show you my kind of nice image. I always think travelling light, especially light slideshow. So I have two slides. A GIF that I made on my phone on the way down, which I will start talking about actually. So this is the kind of thing that I want to talk about. It's living organic growth within a built environment. This particular example is the Raleigh sea monster, which you might have seen if you follow BuzzFeed or just are on the internet. And as you can see from the details around it, that this was shot on a sewer cam on 27th of April 2009 in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Raleigh sea monster was quickly determined not to be a monster, but actually most likely to be a colony of tubifex worms. As biologist Timothy S. Wood suggests, they have apparently entered a pipeline somehow, and in the absence of soil, they're coiling around each other. The contractions you see are the result of a single worm contracting and then stimulating all of the others. So they appear to do it almost simultaneously, so it looks like one big kind of muscle contracting. And this is the kind of thing that I kind of want to frame. I'm not going to talk about, but because, let's see, is it going to move for me? Because I'm an art student, I've made more of a arty thing, so you don't have to look at this contracting anus for the 20 minutes. You can avert your eyes and just softly look at it behind, the anus behind. Right. So I wanted to start with this image from outside of horror cinema and video games as a way of approaching something within those media that was quite nebulous and slippery to pin down. Throughout my research, I thought of them as scabs, tumours, wounds, placenta, cocoons, biofilms, nests, fungus, and most often galls, which is how I'll refer to them in this paper. But none of these real-life forms are will consistently match the overall motif. The motif should be quite familiar to most with an interest in horror. Our protagonists are travelling in an urban environment, looking for something, though rarely that which they end up finding. They will travel to an area which signifies urban decay, or at least neglect and abandonment. It will likely be dirty, it will also pointedly be underused, wasted space, a storage area, ventilation system, a block scheduled for demolition. The environment is explicitly urban, an environment completely designed and theoretically controlled and sealed, not a place where there should be wildlife. However, the lack of human attention has somehow allowed something to happen, and the sterility is lost. Our protagonists walk through concrete, metal, and these hard lines, and almost certainly by the light of a torch, and they'll discover the gall, a biological mass adhered to and penetrating the structure of that built space. The gall might be alive, it might have been alive previously, it might be a means to further life, or it might alter life. The important point is that in contrast to the built environment, it is vital in some manner. This is their first quality. The second quality of these galls is that they are hidden. whilst also hiding something else. As already described, they are found in neglected areas, abandoned buildings, air shafts, sewers, shantytowns and ghettos. These spaces are obviously not entirely neglected. People work in these areas, often people will live in them. However, it is generally not the protagonist, and by extension, neither the projection the audience has with that protagonist that lives in this inner city slum or works in the utility channels, which run through more respectable accommodation. To the protagonist, these ghouls are within their space, the world which they have complete freedom of movement within, but in a corner they have neglected and by virtue of their lifestyle and status have had no reason to check on. When they do eventually check, they will find something has grown in the interim, and this growth is hiding something. It is a living black spot. In a 2016 book chapter entitled Lovecraft's Cosmic Ethics, philosopher Patricia McCormick argues for the work of horror author H.P. Lovecraft to be used to imagine becoming the horrors he evokes towards a vitalistic, activist and wondrous celebration of otherness. It is my position that the motifs of the urban ghoul be used in such a way that this living black spot points towards the emancipation of difference. To understand a ghoul, it's first needed that we understand the controlled environment which is performed prior to the ghoul's discovery. In Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, it traces the genealogy of the prison and proposes that if it is true that the leper colony gives rise to rituals of exclusion, which to a certain extent provide the model for and the general form of the Great Confinement, then the quarantine techniques developed in response to the plague give rise to disciplinary projects. The methods by which the plague was attempted to be controlled in the 17th century were not simple exclusion, but a strict regime of controlled activities, observations, categorizations. Subjects and also architecture, animals, and at least in the theory of the time, pathogens were controlled as a model state. The plague-stricken town traversed throughout with hierarchy, surveillance, observation, writing, the town immobilized by the functioning of an extensive power that bears in a distinct way over all individual bodies. This is the utopia of the perfect governed city. That perfect governed city is invoked as an impossible phantom wherever an FBI agent lifts some protonous gloop with a big pen from the floor of a Baltimore apartment. Despite our best efforts to be pure, be vigilant and behave, the chaotic cosmos found a blind spot to grow in. Foucault again identifies the alignment of the social and biological, noting that behind the disciplinary mechanisms can be read the haunting memories of contagion, of the plague, of rebellions, crimes, vagabondage, desertion, people who appear and disappear and die in disorder. It is in fact no wonder that deviation from moral or state law from approved expressions of subjectivity is often conflated with a lack of sterile surroundings. As noted by the theorist Georges Batailles, when it comes to distinguishing between the upper and lower classes, the difference is in cleanliness. As noted already, ghoul, the term I'm using to describe this motif, is inadequate because the depictions in horror rarely stay fixed to that or any other biological definition. We have things which penetrate cement like roots or weep out of cracks like plasma. We have embedded eggs and waiting to hatch, while other living material adheres to the wall all around them. Frequently, these forms resist classification as anything other than a chimera. Perhaps they exhibit a sensitivity and speed of growth which implies the animal, and yet this combined with the rooting into the architecture and a decentralised plural mass suggests the vegetal. McCormick states that connectivity to the unlike is what defines Lovecraftian entities, and this is true of the ghouls on a number of levels. As noted, they often sit between categories of animals and plants. They might be using another creature, alive or dead, human or otherwise, to provide food or energy, or assist in the birthing or transformation of another. Lastly, it is necessary that the ghoul sits on the threshold of architecture. It needs, within the logic of the horror story, the politicised dichotomy of order-disorder, a sheer urban surface. That sheer surface marks another contrast which must eventually collapse. The ventilation duct, lift shaft, or pensioner's apartment is print error, is nameable and filled with clear signification for us. The thing which I'm referring to as a ghoul does not, at least at first, have such a signification. Its multiple layers of hybridity cite it as a visceral, fleshy, corporeal tetralogy, and emphatically material world is also a world... Sorry. Its multiple layers... Its multiple layers of hybridity cite it in a visceral, fleshy, corporeal, technological, and emphatically material world. It's also a world where human language is without power. You can try and name the thing, but at best you will have something which will always fall short of the sensations provoked, the functions it might perform, or the things it might become. And a kind of note here that, while doing research for this, I was trying to find what else other people might have called this phenomena. And the best thing, obviously, one of the best resources if you're researching any kind of stuff like this is TV tropes. And in TV tropes, this is called meat moss, which is one of my favourite kind of sensory images ever. Now, the meat moss is not exactly gall, but it's close. So McCormick turns to philosopher Luce Irigaray to address the namelessness and quotes the latter. Nor will I ever see the mucus, that most intimate interior of my flesh, neither the touch of the outside of the skin of my fingers, nor the perception of the inside of those same fingers, but another threshold of the passage from outside to inside, from inside to outside, between inside and outside, between outside and inside. Irigaray's mucus, like the gall, refuses the dichotomy of self and other. The gall appears within our supposedly clean and ordered environment. It was always already there in some form of becoming. The gall is almost always hiding something. It creates a protected environment between the cold world of order, a hidden space within a blind spot. Equally, while it sits in initial contrast to the urban sheen of sterile, man-made environment, it collapses this contrast by the sheer fact of its presence. The gall is within the environment, it is part of the architecture, and it pulls its refusal to be named into the concrete, rendering the certainty of the urban a farce. Hidden, unknowable, heterogeneous life running through the material that we believed was pure order and death. While the gall pulls its vital, unknowable qualities into the wall, it doing so penetrates the bubble of order. It also pulls us, and to various degrees our FBI agent protagonist proxy, towards it. The desire produced by association with such material is not only featured in many horror narratives, but within feminist discourse, including that of McCormick's and Irigaray, but most notably by Julia Kristeva's theorising of the abject. We can easily imagine our FBI agent crawling into the cargo hold of the commercial jet, latex glove not quite worn but kind of held in eagerness to touch as they mutter to themselves around the mag light they must have kind of in their teeth, quoting Kristeva, "Not me, not that, but not nothing, either, a something that I do not recognise as a thing, a weight of meaninglessness about which there is nothing insignificant and which crushes me." The gall seduces characters within the fragile texture of a desire of meaning and draws them towards a place where meaning collapses. Just as it draws our agent, it draws us, the audience, along as well. We're seduced by the sensual qualities which are outside of language and therefore hidden from annihilation through naming and knowing. There is also often the uncanny familiarity which breaks down the certainty that this is not me. It could have been part of me. It could have been within me in the future. The gall has already destroyed sterility of our perceived environment and forces us to realise that it was permeable. The mere sight of the gall reminds us that permeability is essential to our very existence, no matter how much we attempt to expand the buffer zone around us through buildings and their politics. Our bodies will always be spilling out over the edges of the orderly frames we insist they conform to. As philosopher Margaret Childrich tells us, the security of categories, whether self or non-self, is undone by radical undecidability. This is one of the calls being made by the repeated motif of the gall. It offers a chance to consider our own porosity to things that would breach the category human, and in doing so challenge the validity of that category at all. The gall produces desire in combination with us. That desire is not one of lack, but is created by our encounter with this unknowable, which points towards various functions and various kinds of life and voracious connectivity. This is what is proposed by philosopher Gilles Deleuze and psychoanalyst Felix Guattari as desiring production, an articulation of desire not based on lack, but a creative production. For every organ machine and energy machine, all the time, flows and interruption. The encounter with the gall produces new desires, new potential operations. In Deleuze and Guattari's terminology, we are growing organs, the we being us and the galls together. This creativity does not stop at the point of being eaten by or being birthed by or radically altered by the gall, but extends beyond, just as it extends into the now obviously porous and flexible surrounds. We have to develop the organs to consider our entire reproductive system diffused across oceans, if only to recoil in horror at the very thought of that. As we fumble for meaning, we connect to a multitude of other ways of being, none of which are compatible with our previous ideological category of human. Finally, There is an emancipatory possibility offered by the repeated motif of the ghoul if used in this manner. The ghoul is presented as a constant reminder of urban vulnerability and the failure of the society to maintain complete discipline against disorder in its broader sense. However, equally, it is a radically resilient call for life. The ghoul presents possibilities, a voracious drive for proximity with alterity. This unknowable, vital, secret thing repeatedly crops up to offer hope against a tyrannical order. More than this, it creates new possibilities by producing desire. This is what McCormick refers to as becoming a human. The becoming a human occurs when we with our encounter with art, but particularly with our encounter with horror cinema. McCormick says the art encounter elucidates the new horror and wonder of being in an asignified world as a new state of constant ecstasy, functioning, expressive entity, nevertheless outside of time. While we never arrive at the state of ahumanity, our effective encounter with this thing beyond produces new desire. In the words of Guattari, the extensive A-signifying rupture summons forth a creative repetition that forges incorporeal objects, abstract machines, and universes of value that make their presence felt as though they'd always already been there, although they were entirely dependent on the existential event that brings them into life. The encounter with the ghoul is not just reaching out mucosal suckers towards us, but us developing our own tentacles, and in doing so render ourselves strange. The urban ghoul is revolutionary, not in the sense of a sleeper cell, but in the sense of an active agent of alterity, reaching out past the protagonist and meeting the mucus of the viewer.